Welcome to everybody. Initially, the FNRS, maybe we can have the screen. Thank you. Yes, initially the FNRS was created in 1928 to finance grants and mandates for researchers hosted in the universities. And over time, associated specialized funds have been created to finance collective fundamental research projects on the one hand, and to finance basic strategic research on the other. So it means basic research in areas more directly related to valorization or societal needs. We now have 8 of these funds, including the youngest, FRFS. Maybe you can zoom on it, thank you. It's the Fonds de Recherche Fondamentale Stratégique, created in 2013 and entirely financed by the Walloon region. The objective of the FRFS is to provide long-term support for the research programs of high-level principal investigators doing fundamental research in strategic areas for the Walloon economy. The FRFS has its own board, but is managed by the FNRS staff. As we can see on the next slide, we organize the calls for programs, including evaluation and selection, and we ensure the financial and administrative management of the selected programs. And we collaborate with the WEL Research Institute. It is a non-profit organization that was founded in 2009 under the name WEL Bio, but was renamed WEL Research Institute this year. And this is led by Dr. Vincent Gossin, who will speak after my introduction. In addition to contributing to the strategy of the cause, WEL Research Institute mission is to assist in the early detection and valorization of intellectual property of results obtained in the research programs, and to assist in this way the transformation of a disruptive innovation into an impact in health and sustainable transition. WEL Research Institute has indeed 2 departments, WEL Bio for Walloon Excellence in Life Science and Biotechnology, created in 2009, and WEL T, created in 2022 for Walloon Excellence in Technology. So WEL T will support strategic research of excellence in engineering sciences, chemistry, and physics, with a view to developing breakthrough innovations for industrial applications aimed at sustainable transition. And the director of WEL Research Institute, Vincent Gossin, will explain more about this. And then Arnaud Gollartz, Director of Research Administration at the FNRS, will present the first call WEL T that will be open next week. Thank you all for your interest in this call, your participation in this webinar, and I also would like to thank all the collaborators for the work in preparing this webinar. I give the floor to Vincent Gossin.
Okay, thank you. On the next slide. So good afternoon, everyone. Before deep diving into the more details of the call for WEL T programs, I would like to share with you a bit more about the WEL Research Institute and what we're aiming for. So the WEL Research Institute was created in 2009 by the Walloon regions with 2 missions. Those missions have really been our pillars through the last decade and are to support strategic basic research of excellence, as well to translate disruptive innovation into an impact in health for the WEL Bio department and sustainable transition for the WEL T department. So to support the strategic research of excellence, we partner with the FNRS, as you just heard, for the organization of call for research programs. Programs can be submitted by PIs in universities of the Wallonia-Brussels Federations. And what's also very important to us is that the selection is conducted by an international and independent scientific commission. Funded PIs are then automatically affiliated to the WEL Research Institute, as well as they are affiliated to their host university. Then after, once you are funded and you become a WEL Research Institute PI, then the next step will be to meet with you several times per year in the context of what we call valorization committees, in which we have the PI, members of the TTO, and a member of the WEL Research Institute. And during those meetings, we'll discuss progress in your science, manuscript you would like to publish. And the goal of those meetings is to have an early detection of intellectual property so that we can discuss with you next steps to take to protect it, and as well how to valorize it. And this valorization can take several flavors, as you can imagine, like spin-off creation, licensing, industrial collaboration, for example. So on the next slide. So as was mentioned previously, the WEL Research Institute is composed of two departments, WEL Bio, which was created since inception, and hence the name of the institution was initially WEL Bio. And it's a focus on life sciences for an impact in health. The newly created WEL T department was created this year, and then we changed the name of the institution into the WEL Research Institute, and WEL T will focus on engineering sciences, chemistry, and physics for an impact in sustainable transition. And so before moving to the specific of WEL T, I wanted to share a couple of slides on WEL Bio to show you a little bit how it had been working for us for the next decade. So since 2011, with the support of the FNRS, we organized 6 calls for programs, which allowed to support 88 research programs that were led by 60 investigators and their teams. In terms of scientific excellence, what we can see, we can look at that with as in terms of results, in terms of number of scientific publications, and in particular in high-ranking journals. But we look also as our PI are able to go and get funded with other very prestigious funding, like the ERC grants, for example. And there is also recognition of the excellence of their work through several awards and prizes. On the next slide. On the next slide, we can see the impact in terms of innovation in health. Programs in WEL Bio are distributed in several therapeutic areas, which are shown on the slide on the left. And those programs led to the submission of the 33 patent applications, the creations of 5 spin-off. We had 1 licensing contract, which generated our first industrial revenues, and we have many industrial collaborations as well. So now shifting to the WEL T with the first call launching next week, and we're very excited about that. And this call is aiming specifically for strategic fundamental research of excellence in engineering, chemistry, and physics, with the view of developing breakthrough innovations for industrial application aimed at sustainable transition. And I will really insist that it's really the combination of all the words listed here in blue on the slide that will make a good fit for the WEL T call. So we're really looking for fundamental research in the fields that are listed here, looking at also breakthrough innovation, something that, you know, could be a long-term for application. That's okay, because we're starting from fundamental research and with an impact aim at sustainable transition. So that's strategic for the Walloon region to be able to aim with into that direction. In the next slide, in terms of what it means, you'll be submitting research programs that will span for 4 years. So submitting a scientific program of 4 years that's really core to the lab. It will be flexible in the sense that you'll be allowed to adapt really your research focus depending on the results you will get through this 4-year program. What's important is that the Scientific Commission will evaluate these 4-year scientific programs, but the research agreements will be 2 research agreements for 2 years each. And Mr. Goulart will go into more details after that later on. What also is important to mention is that after for your 4 years, you are allowed to renew it and to apply to a future call for programs as well. And we aim at having really straightforward processes that for the administrative processes, as well for budget management, so that it's as flexible as possible for you. So for example, after year 2, the prolongation for year 3 and 4 is an administrative process because your scientific program for 4 years has already been evaluated by the scientific commission. And there is a phasing out period at the end of year 4 in case you would not be renewed. And in terms of evaluation criteria, we have 3 evaluation criteria that have been used since inception as well for WEL Bio, which are the quality of the applicants, the scientific excellence of the proposed program, and the focus on valorization of the intellectual property. And so the quality of the applicant is really based on, if you go back to the next previous one, the quality of the applicant is based on your CV and most recent publications as well, and current application you might have had. And scientific excellence of the proposed programs are criteria that are most common for applications in fundamental research. But I will spend a bit more time now on the third one, which is the focus on valorization of the intellectual property. Which means that here you will have the opportunity on the next slide to really showcase any experience you might have had in the process of valorization of intellectual property. So here you can, on the first bullet point, you'll have to write if you have had any intellectual property in the past. It can take any form and shapes that the intellectual property may have. And also, if you have had any past or present IP, what's your experience in transferring it for an economic impact? Did you have any licensing, industrial collaboration, this type of things? So it can take any other shapes and forms of experience. Then the third point, which is mandatory for everyone, will be a transparency statement, which means that if you have any collaborations or interactions that have any constraint on the future intellectual property that you might have, it needs to be disclosed in this transparency statement, and specifically in that place in the application process, and not buried into the middle of the scientific part. And that's very important to declare any impact on freedom to use any of your future intellectual property that could emerge from the proposed program. If you have none, you have to just write not applicable. So that part is mandatory. And the next slide, we have also point which will be mandatory for all applicants, which is really what's the projected potential valorization that could emerge from your program. And we understand that we start from fundamental research, that you might not have anything concrete right now, but just project what could be possible, and that's what's important. So you'll have to indicate important unmet needs in sustainable transition in your field of research, describe any application that could stem from that, the steps you would take to develop it and finance it, what would be the main competitions globally, how you would protect your IP, and if you had any previous contact with the industry. So these are things that you can fill out in this place. So on the next slide, I think that's where I leave the floor to Mr. Gulatz next to me to give you even more details about the whole call.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Arno Gulatz. I'm the Director of Research Administration for the FNRS. I will provide you with more practical and hands-on details about this call. Can I have the first slide, please? Regarding the eligibility, it's rather classic. The 5 universities active in the field here concerned from the French-speaking university are eligible. You see them here on the screen. Regarding the eligibility for individual researchers, for the PIs, the standards FNRS eligibility criteria do apply, and the WEL-T program can be cumulated with the other FNRS funding. Now, regarding the scheme as a whole, you have 2 main pipelines of funding. You have the first starting grant, which can reach the amount of 200 kilo euros per year at most. It is devoted for early career researchers with an experience post-PhD from 0 to 12 years. Then we have the advanced grant with an amount up to 350K per year at most. This is designed for more established researchers, leaders with an experience higher than 12 years post PhD, or those who were previously funded through a starting grant scheme. So once you have got a starting grant, you cannot come in this category anymore. You have to switch to the advanced grant category. Next slide, please. For the evaluation criteria, Mrs. Gaussin went through this already, but I can do it again. It's never useless. Regarding the quality of the applicant, and scientific excellence is a rather classical approach for research programs assessment. You will have to provide a CV, also your 5 most important publications, and you will have to explain why you think those are the most important publications. You do not have to provide the 5 publications, but you have to provide from the at least 1 and then up to 5 if you can or if you want. You will be asked also to provide some details on European and international grant applications and the current status of these applications. Then maybe something more specific to this WEL-T call is details on the focus and valorization for the intellectual property, but that has been explained by Mrs. Gaussin already. Next slide, please. The schedule and calendar, the call will be open next week on December 15. The deadline is February 9 for the PIs, the applicants, and then February 16 for directors and the institution authorities. Between March and June 2023, we will process the proposals. We will evaluate, made these proposals evaluated by individual experts, remote experts. We will consolidate the scientific commission, and we will proceed together with the scientific commission to the pre-selection of the starting grants that will be invited to the interview by the commission. The commission will take place between June 12 and June 14, and during this commission, we will evaluate and assess the advanced grant as well as the pre-selected starting grant applicants. Then during the end of June, there will be a funding decision. It's a complex mechanism that will be explained a little bit later, and the start of the convention, the research project, are scheduled for October 1st, 2023. Next slide, please. This is the whole decision/evaluation mechanism. So you introduce a proposal. This proposal is sent to individual scientific experts who will make a first assessment of the quality of the applications. Then sent to this scientific panel, we will be able to make a pre-selection of the starting candidates. Then altogether, this proposal and the pre-selected starting grant candidate will be sent to the scientific commission, who will interview the pre-selected starting grant applicant and assess the proposals for the advanced grants as well. Once the scientific commission reach a consensus on ranking and evaluation, it will be sent to the WEL governing board, who will make a first validation of this ranking and decision for funding. That will be then validated once again by the FRFS Board of Trustees. Once it has been completely validated, the feedback will be sent to all applicants, and the start of the program is then scheduled, as I said before, for October 1st, 2023. Next slide, please. The composition of the scientific commission can be found on internet. Regarding valorization experts and observers member, we are still working on it. The application is a web-based application, like any application now to the classical call of FNRS. 3 main parts for this application: scientific part in which you are expected to provide some details on preliminary data, explain your hypothesis, limitations and mitigation plans, your methods, and the focus on valorization. You will be asked as well to provide some information on the available resources of the laboratory, your European and international grants application, the last 5 years, as well as the results of your applications related to the proposed program nationally. A list of your main collaborators will be useful also for us to address and to assess your working environment, as well as to avoid major conflict of interest in the later process. You will have the opportunity to provide your full CV and full list of publication on the top of it. Can I have the next slide, please? Just some tips here. The application will be in English. You can request classical cost categories: personal, operating, subcontracting. The overhead I'll come back to it later, and equipment. The overhead concerns the operating and personal cost, and it has to be included in the budget. It is of 15%. For the personnel, it allows the hiring of scientific or technical employees, namely doctoral or postdoctoral fellows, non-doctoral or technician fellows as well. And for the employment modalities, you have to see that with your institution, because the FNRS will not hire these personnel. So they will be the employees of the universities. Yep. For the operating costs, it concerns consumables that are needed for the execution of the program, small scientific and technical equipment. The equipment and maintenance is eligible here only for the equipment acquired by or through the WEL-T funding. Internal services are eligible as well if the other team providing the service belongs to the same institution, the same legal entity. For the trainings, it's only available for the staff paid through the WEL-T budgets, while the missions, the staff paid or not by the WEL-T budget is eligible. For the publication in open access, it's a classical contribution of FNRS of 750 euros per article, and you can pay some softwares as well. The subcontracting, we mean by subcontracting services provided on behalf of the research by third parties having a distinct personality as that of the host institution. So it differs from what we meant previously by internal services. And then you have the category equipment for the execution of the program, but we do need justification and price offers for the evaluation. The budget, Mrs. Gossin provided some details on each already. While you have to describe a 4-year project, these 4 years is divided in 2 parts. So you will have for one 4-year project, 2 agreements, 2 research conventions. You have to provide a detailed budget for the first 2 years and a budget strategy for the year 3 and 4. But the total for the years 3 and 4 should be less or equal to the year 1 and 2. The reconduction of the program between the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 years is an administration thing. It's administrative reconduction. Regarding ethics, it's common sense that the work package and the tasks concerned by ethical approvals cannot be started unless you have the approval of the local ethical committee, but this is a common sense. For ex post and DMP management of the data, it can be collected in parallel during the lifespan of the program, the research program. It will be done through a module developed in eSpace, so the same platform that you will use to submit your proposal. The language is English, the same as the one that you used for the submitting your proposal. And the final report is expected at the end of 4-year programs. While you will be asked to provide an intermediate report at the end of each year through a simple module. The DMP and ex post is extremely simple if we compare it to other institutions or other programs. Can you go to the next one, please? For the flexibility, the transfers are allowed in subcategories. You don't have to notify us. While transfer between budget categories need a prior authorization by the FRFS and WEL-T. The hiring of personnel does not require prior authorization by the FRFS WEL-T, and changes in personnel could be notified 2 ways: by email us or just via the annual report following these changes. The restriction, each 2-year funding period is subject to a distinct research agreement. We have said that there is no extension of use of the budget after the end of the research agreement. unless exception, if you are not renewed, then there is a phasing out of maximum 6 months during which you could use the leftovers or the positive balance of your project. Positive balance cannot be transferred from one convention to the other. It will be returned to the FRFS. Finally, you can find all these details in the rules and regulation and mini guides who are published, which are published now, I think, on the website already. I think I'm done, and I will be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Arnaud. I will try now to summarize and relay the questions that have been asked. I will start with the first question. It has to see with the idea of sustainable transition, and the question is asked by saying how is it defined, this sustainable transition? I think that Vincent Gossin can answer this question.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for this question, which is an important one. So sustainable transition seems pretty clear, and at the same time, it's pretty vast. And it's on purpose because we want to make sure that, you know, we are planning for future as well, and the future of sustainable transition. As guidelines, you can always take the domaine d'innovation stratégique, the DIS that were defined by the Walloon region, all of them except of the one related to health. That's a guideline. But again, I invite you to go ahead, think out of the box, what could be sustainable transition in your field of research and projecting for the future of breakthrough innovation and what it means.
Thank you very much. Another question about biology and biotech sectors. It's outside, it's not covered by, there is a part that is not covered by WEL Bio since its creation. Maybe some more information about these aspects. That's a question that it's important in this framework.
Absolutely, that's an important question. And indeed, the scopes have been defined by the Walloon region. WEL Bio is life science for an impact in health, and WEL T is engineering science, chemistry, and physics for an impact in sustainable transition. So we are aware it might not cover everything, but at the moment, that's how it has been scoped in.
Another question easy to answer is computer science included in the engineering field covered by WEL T?
For me, as long as you know you have all the keywords that I mentioned, that it's a fundamental research that can lead to breakthrough innovation in sustainable transition in the general fields of engineering, chemistry, and physics, then it's applicable.
A question about ERC. You mentioned that, and the question is, what's the link with ERC? But there is no link, of course.
So just to be really clear, there's absolutely no link with the ERC. We just mentioned that some of our PIs were successful in getting some ERC funding, which is another way to showcase their excellence in science.
One question for Arnaud Gollars. What do you mean by standard eligibility criteria? Can non-permanent researchers apply SBIs?
No, the question is, the answer is simple. You have to hold a permanent position. It is not open to non-permanent personnel within the institutions.
I don't know who's going to answer this question, but do we know how many projects will be granted?
So I don't have a crystal ball in my hands. It will also depend on how many of you will be applying in terms of, success rate. What we can tell is that, WEL Bio started with 15 programs. We are now at 37 programs. The success rate is about, for the WEL Bio experience, was about around 25%. But this is the first call we have in WEL T. So, we'll tell you more when we'll be closing the call. But I invite you to really work with your ADRE and go ahead and apply.
Maybe a question for Arnaud Gollartz. Just to be sure, the PI in this application process is determined in advance, sorry. So as a university professor, it is possible to submit the proposal in our names and then later appoint the researchers. Question is easy to answer.
Yes, it is a classical project funding approach. So you apply as the main promoter, and then you will get the budget to hire the personnel afterwards.
And the following question is quite similar. Regarding the research project proposal itself, is it quite similar section structure as for conventional FNRS research projects? Arnaud Gollartz.
Yes, we worked pretty hard to maintain as close as possible from a regular FNRS call, same platform, same tools. So yes, it will be very familiar to you.
Maybe a question for Véronica Louin. It has to see with the success rate and the total budget allocated to this call.
Oh, I think I have the same answer given than the one given by Vincent Gossin. It's not possible today to answer that, but of course we are aware that having a success rate of too low is not a good point. So we'll see how many applications we will receive, and we'll have discussion on what are the budgetary possibilities for this.
Another question, important question, is electrical engineering covered by the call? And someone says, I raise this question because nobody represents this field in the scientific commission. Important question.
Okay, so the scientific commission, are, big key opinion leaders in their own fields, and they will really consolidate the evaluation that they will receive from experts, individual experts that will conduct individual evaluation. And those experts will be very specific to the field. So every single application will be sent to at least 2 or 3 scientific experts very specifically in their field. And all this individual evaluation will be sent to the scientific commission, which will really consolidate all this. So the fields in the scientific commission is not the one conducting, who's included or not in terms of field in the application.
What will be the call frequency every year, every 2 years?
So it will be every other year, so every 2 years.
Will it be possible to apply to WEL T each year, even if we had a refused WEL T the previous year?
Yes, please.
The answer is shorter than the question. It's not that easy for me. Is the call, but this question has already been answered, I think. Is the call open for non-permanent researcher?
No, at the application stage, you cannot apply if you're not a permanent researcher.
Another question, I'm reading that, am I right to understand that WEL T will be recurring calls? If so, how often will there be calls? Every other years, but this answer has already been answered. I'm sorry about that. I'm reading the next question because I'm not sure I understand it very well. Positive balance from 1 2-year convention cannot be transferred to the 3-4 year convention.
No, it cannot, because it's divided in 2 independent fundings. It's the same program, but 2 fundings. So the positive balance you may have at the end of the 2nd year cannot be transferred to the year 3 and 4.
One word or one figure about the total envelope.
Yes, the total envelope for this pilot call is about 8.5 million euros for 2 years.
I'm reading the following question. Someone thanks us for the presentation. You're welcome. And he realizes that the emphasis is placed on the fundamental research with potential applications in industry. And the question is having an industrial spin-off partner or collaborator a positive aspect for the grant evaluation and valorization, or more seen as a limitation?
Thank you for this excellent question, which is a very important one as well. So if you have any contact with the industry in any shapes or forms, including being involved in a spin-off or an industrial collaboration, it will showcase your experience with the valorization process, which is one part of, the boxes you can fill in the application process. But then we'll be asking you to be very cautious in filling out the transparency statement, because we want to make sure that the research programs that you are proposing, which is fundamental research, is not impacted by this industrial collaboration. So we want to make sure that the program you're proposing is not at 100% of the program. The industrial partner does not have right of first refusal, for example, on the entire program you're proposing, because it would mean that WEL-T would be funding indirectly this industrial partner. So we want to make sure we're funding fundamental research in your lab, and that your IP, your future IP would be free to use. So that's why it's important. You can showcase your experience with the industrial world, but showcase also that you understand how to segment it compared to your basic research.
Next question is about the necessary support or partner, an industrial partner, I mean, in order to apply. Is it true?
So we totally understand that, as a scientist and conducting fundamental science, most of you or some of you might not have any valorization experience, and that's okay. This is a program of scientific excellence and of fundamental research. So that's a key driver for the WEL-T application, as well as it's been for WEL Bio for a decade. So it's really the 4 years of scientific excellence that's a driver. And if you have any experience with the industry, you can showcase that. But if you don't, you still have to think about what would be the unmet needs in your research field. How would you go ahead if you had any discoveries to protect it and to develop it? So just that's an exercise of projection in the future.
A question about interviews. And the question is, advanced grants will not be interviewed?
The advanced grant
will not be interviewed. I confirm the advanced grant will not be interviewed.
Next question is the following. Are previous EU international grants mandatory to apply?
No, it is not.
Next question. Would topics related to the built environment, energy, efficiency, comfort, health, and well-being be covered by this call? There does not seem to be a representation of this expertise in the scientific panel. Arnaud Gollaerts.
Once again, I think it's more of the this question should be covered by Mrs. Gossin, but I can answer that the panel is not all. We rely on at least 4 different international experts, independent experts for the peer review, and the synthesis will be made by the scientific commission. So it is not because one topic is not covered by the panel or precisely covered by the panel that it cannot be submitted, that it will not be treated properly.
Thank you. I'm reading the following question. The FNRS has recently streamlined the management rules for the projects it funds. Why maintain the obligation to obtain the agreement of the FNRS before transferring budget between the different categories in WEL-T? And the answer will be given by Arnaud Gollaerts.
Yeah, either of us could have answered this. It's true that we have simplified a lot our administrative management of the projects, but the funder is not the same. The funder here is different, is another entity. So it has not been discussed already in depth with the Walloon region. It doesn't mean that it will not happen, but so far it is not applicable. However, the WEL-T and WEL Bio do provide some flexibility that FNRS didn't use to provide. So we are in the between here. So you have some flexibility, but still you have to notify and get the authorization for some budget modifications. Okay. Maybe you want to add something.
I can add just to that, just to understand the reason why. So you have three major categories: personal operating costs and equipments. You have a lot of flexibility within each of these categories, but we just want to have a check if you have any major shift between those three categories. We just want to make sure, for example, that at the end of year 2 or the end of year 4, you're not going to shift unused operating costs to buy a big equipment by the end of your research program. So it's important that we keep this dialogue with you, but again, in a very flexible fashion.
2 questions already about the next calls. The first one is, when is the next call? And the second one is, will the next calls be on the same thematic? I mean, sustainable transition.
So sustainable transition is not a thematic, that's the scope of WEL T. So, and that's why we had several, working group meetings to really discuss and think through about the scope of the WEL T, because that's a scope that will stay for the future of WEL T as well. So that's really engineering, chemistry, and physics for breakthrough innovations for an impact in sustainable transition. So that will remain true. Within those calls, we don't have any thematics per se. We don't want to guide, or because we want to make sure we can get from you the best of the science in the thematics that you are conducting. Next call after this one, which is the pilot one, we're planning on every other year, every 2 years, but we need each time, it's depending on budget we will be receiving.
Yes, it's depending on budget, but normally we should organize it in the same calendar in 2 years, if the budget are confirmed.
One question about the valorization experience. And the question is, if we have no valorization experience, does it mean that our chance of success are just 0 and this call is not for us? But I think we already answered that, but some more comments? Maybe not.
Well, I can say it again, because I think it's a very
important.
It's a very, very important point. So again, we have 3 evaluation criteria. We have scientific excellence of the research program, which must be a fundamental research program for 4 years. You have your CV, so the quality of the applicants. And then on top of that, we are asking the focus on the attention you'll be giving to the valorization process in intellectual property. And we use the word focus and not experience, or not, it's the attention you'll be giving to that aspects. So you can have already experience, that you can showcase, but you have 0 experience, then you have to showcase that you'll focus on it by explaining, what will be the unmet needs in sustainable transition in your field of research, explaining what could be a potential output applicable from your research programs, and how you would go on to developing it and funding this application. So again, that's the attention that you give to that aspect that's really important.
Is tissue engineering covered by this call, Arnaud Gollartz? Okay.
I think that should be addressed by the Director General of WEL T.
Nobody wants to answer this question.
That's a tough one, but it needs to have an impact in sustainable transition. So again, all the keywords I've shown in blue in that slide, that it's, engineering, chemistry, and physics for breakthrough innovation for an impact in sustainable transition. That's all the checkbox that you need to check to see if you're eligible.
A question about joint application. It means 2 PIs from 2 different universities. Arnaud Gollartz.
So these calls are meant to be led by 1 PI per application.
Okay, I'm reading the following question. In case of industrial collaboration, is present, but they do not impact future PI generated by the project, is it better to indicate not applicable or articulate it in the section to avoid confusion?
I think it's useful to articulate, you know, with the non-confidential information in the transparency statement so that we understand the boundaries of what will be the program as well that you'll be conducting in your lab.
How much partners in the proposal are accepted? Is there a limit?
It is led by the one PI, but regarding the partners per se, there's no limitations. It is led towards by one PI that can describe the work environments, the collaborations, the link, the network.
I think that's all for the moment. I don't know whether you want to add anything, piece of information or underline, but I think that all the questions have been answered. Maybe no, one more, and I'm reading it. Thanks a lot for all the information and explanations provided regarding this new program. Question, which is not related to WEL-T, might you be, by any chance, be able to give us an indication on when we can expect the results on the FNRS project submitted in July? Véronique Alloin.
The funding decisions will be taken by the board in June, sorry. End of June. And so the results will be published a couple of days after the meeting, the board meeting. And does it answer the question? Yes. Okay. Yes.
I'm sure it has. Another question has to see with interdisciplinarity. I think we answered this question, but maybe some more details about that or comments. I don't know. Yes, questions about the TTO. TTOs, but I'm reading this question. It's not my opinion. TTOs are the weakest link in the value chain. PIs fill in patent applications, then not much happen, and IP falls in public domain. Why valorization would be more efficient with a WEL-T? That's the question. Will PIs be asked to do the valorization job?
So that's an excellent question, and that's really at the heart of the model of the WEL Research Institute. So what we do once you are funded is that we will meet with you several times per year proactively. We will not wait for you to think that you might have some IP, because then it might become too late and you might want to submit your manuscript. What we want to do is to be very proactive, and we do that in the context of a valorization committee composed of the PI, members of their TTO, and members of the WEL Research Institute. Together, we meet several times per year. You explain to us your recent progress in the science, manuscript you might want to submit, and proactively then we see if there is any intellectual property, so that we can already make sure that it's not putting a delay on your wish to submit a manuscript, for example. Then, which is going back to the question, is what do we do with this patent application? Because that's only the beginning of a new story. And we are going to meet with you so that we can write it together, and with your TTO representative as well, so that even before we submit the patent application, we want to think, what can we do with that? And how are we going to do that? What other source of funding can we get? Can we write a pitch with you? Can we go and meet some of the industrials? That's where also we articulate, which is very important, with the competitivity clusters in the Walloon regions, where they know their industrial members, and we can meet with them to understand whether there could be any industrial that could be of interest to meet in the Walloon region. If there is none, then we go to the rest of the world, but we try to have an economic impact first in the Walloon regions. So we do this together and very proactively. So I hope this is answering your question.
Thank you. Is there a specific budget for starting an advanced grants, or will it depend on the application number of each?
It is not fixed yet. It will depend on the recommendations from the scientific commission. So it will depend on the results of the evaluation made by the scientific commission.
Another question, if successful, will we have to fill style sheets at which frequency? What about the reporting in general?
I have no idea what its type sheet is, but what I can say is that the reporting module will be open on the total lifespan of the project, and once a year, the information will be gathered and will constitute the core of the annual reporting. And then the same will happen for the last reporting after the 4th year. I don't know if you want to add something.
Yes, I would like to add that we want to keep this reporting very light. So it's once a year. And in terms of information is, publication that you've published during the last 12 months, people on your budget, if you had received any honors or awards. So we want to keep very factual and very brief to you. And again, I think it will be open throughout the year, so you can build on and add information throughout the year, but we do a pull on the information on a fixed date every year.
One specific question about the scientific autonomy within the laboratory. It is stated, and it's the question in the regulations, that the applicant must demonstrate scientific autonomy within the laboratory in which he or she evolves. Is there any more information on what that encompasses in the case, for instance, of a freshly appointed permanent researcher?
So this question probably relates to the starting grant application, where we want to make sure that the PI has demonstrated his or her own independence. We want to make sure that it's really the PI's own research programs. And in terms of demonstrating independence, it's again up to you to have those tools. There is not a finite list that you have with a checkbox, but for you to demonstrate to the scientific commission that you have been independent. Some examples would be, last author publications, or getting other grants funded with your own name as you being the PI. These are just examples, but you can have other ways of showing that you have been you're independent.
Another question, and I don't know whether it has been already answered, but can a partner of one project be a PI of another one?
You can be a scientific collaborator in one project and be a PI of another, but not be PI for two.
Another question, do the reporting meeting with WEL-T members and TTO address all preprints of the PI or only those related to the WEL-T project?
Publications, preprints is for publications. So we're going to discuss the WEL-T program research that you have applied, which should be core to your lab. But again, if you have other research projects or those that might be linked to the industry, then you need to understand the boundaries between the WEL-T programs and other funds that you might have in the lab. But the WEL-T programs can be also including other sources of funding as well, as long as it's basic research.
Another question about interdisciplinarity. Is it evaluated? Is it mandatory or not? I am asking that question because it's asked several times.
Oh, it's not at all mandatory.
Yeah. So to be clear, it's an application is applied by one PI. That's the one PI who's the point of contact for this application. then the PI can have as many collaborators as he wants within the Walloon region and outside the rest of the world. That's up to the PI to manage those collaborations. One of the reasons we ask to have the main collaborators in the application, it's also mostly to understand if there is any potential conflict of interest when we go looking for experts to evaluate your application. So I just want to make sure there is no confusion there.
One very last question, provided that PI is based in one of the eligible universities, may collaborations with experts based at universities outside of FWB be accepted, and may these included in the budget? In this case, would this be a collaboration or a subcontracting?
Well, it could be subcontracting if it is for one dedicated task, technical service. Now you will not be able to pay for consumable in Harvard, let's say. Collaborations are allowed, and you may the traveling expenses, for example, may be eligible, but you cannot pay some consumables abroad, as far as I know, for example. But subcontracting is possible for a dedicated technical task.
Will the reviewers be asked to sign non-disclosure agreements? Because patenting is an objective, and it's the question.
Yes, of course, but they do it for every call made by the FNRS. They have to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
One very, very last question. It's almost 1 o'clock. How much money WEL Research Institute has to maintain the patent? Can you answer that question?
Of course,
Vinciane?
yes. So just to understand, the IP will belongs. So we have agreements between the WEL Research Institute and all the universities of the Wallonia-Brussels Federation. In this agreement, the IP that's generated through the WEL-T programs belong fully to the universities. So that's the universities who will take and fund the patent applications. But the WEL-T and the WEL Research Institute, we're going to lead the valorization committees and the valorization process.
And the final question is for you, Arnaud Gollartz. It is about the more information during the process, during the grant application process. To whom can we ask questions or help?
You will find this detail in the mini guide of the call, but I can already tell you that you can address your questions to the regular address on the one that we're using for the regular calls, credits-projects@FRS-FNRS.be, but this can be found on the mini guide.
And the address is appearing on the screen. I think that's all. Any additional comment or a conclusion? No? Okay. I want to thank you all for your questions, for being here. And thank you to you for saying in the Q&R window that the presentation was very clear. Thank you all, and good luck to everybody. Thank you very much.